Hello, this is Professor Mike Labasi with Sinclair College. I'm here to talk about some Python tips for data analysis. This probably would be the second in this series. The first one's a little longer, but it's going to really get your teeth into Python if you never touched it before. This one we're going to look at parsing files, which is probably going to be the mainstay for working with data analysis. So, example, a CSV file or a text file you need to parse to get data out of. As before, I'm going to cut to a tip I have video for my Python class, but I'm going to start off here saying a few things. First off, here's some URLs, and you'll notice that I use Jupyter Notebook, but it looks a little different in this video I'm going to post here, and it is using something called Collaboratory, which is a Google Jupyter Notebook in the cloud. So it's great to practice with, and you can actually do some minor data analysis with it, but you can also do everything I'm doing here in Jupyter Notebook. If you're doing some heavy lifting, a lot of parsing a large file, you might want to go and do that on your local machine. We have more power. There are paid tiers for this, of course, but I'm not going to suggest you do that. It's up to you. And of course, I'm going to refer to this Python for Everybody textbook. Now, there's a file I'm going to use in this. If you want to practice along, you can go to this URL. It's the pythonforeveryone.com. Hopefully you bookmarked that. It's a fantastic um, resource. And then there's a code3 mbox.txt or text file. So you can right click and download that file as is. So again, so we're looking at working with file handlers. So this is the Python for Everybody textbook. And there's some important things we're going to talk about. So coming off the last one, again, we have a variable, and this is called a file handle. So I'm calling it txt file, and I have some camel case in here. You can call it whatever you want. Call it data1 or whatever makes sense to you. Equals, and then we're using a command called open. So it's the open command, and it's open and close. We're actually calling this function, and we're going to give it the location of the file. So here's a tip. Keep the notebook you're using. So my notebook, I keep that and any files in the same folder. That's my, because otherwise you need to put the full path. And whenever I teach Python, students will say, "Well, I put in the file name, but this is in your downloads directory, but this is maybe in a folder called class, Spring class, Python class, week 3, 4, whatever." And because they're in different locations, it's going to give an error saying cannot find files. So just a tip. So this is going to your working through your process, your workflow. It's fine to keep files wherever you want. Just be aware that it's easier to say to file.csv if this file CSV is in the same folder as your notebook. So maybe it's called your data project IPYNB, which is an extension for IPython notebooks. So keep that in mind. That's a tip. So again, that's what we put here. We put in the location of the file, and it is in quotes, and you can see it here. It's like they use them called single quotes or strong quotes. I think double quotes also work, but it's probably good to stick with that. Um, so we'll go and do strong quotes here. So now this text file is now a variable. So we can actually now say for each, and this is what we're going to do in the video. I'm going to, so go through this, but you can see it right here. We set a variable called count, and let me get that out. So here, there's actually a variable called count right there equals 0. So this, of course, would be an integer, and I'm using a for loop. So for line in this count equals count plus 1. It's going to count number of lines, and then it's going to print out the text line count, and we're going to use the comma to say go ahead now throw the variable, which we just variable count, into it. So that's a quick example. And the important thing here is this for loop for line in fhand. So again, this is our file handler. This is how we interact with the file. This file's been opened, mbox short.txt as fhand. So that's a great way to parse through files. Now there's another tip here, and that is when you work with this, you do the for, and I'll probably do this in the video, for line in, and we'll call this txt file. Excuse my chicken scratch. There's a colon there. You hit return, and it's going to automatically indent it. Leave it where it's at. Don't add spaces. Don't backspace. Python uses these white space as its sort of programming construct. So as soon as you backspace or add more spaces, you will start getting indentation errors. So just go to the colon, hit return, and then do your next thing, hit return again. Let's just keep that, and then you can backspace when you're done to do your final like print, for example, like we do here. So that's another tip. It's probably in here in the textbook. Um, and there's some good stuff here. So another one is if line dot starts with. So this is called string parsing. This is fantastic. So what we think is just a blob of string, just maybe a line in a file, can actually be parsed. It can look for certain things, starts with, ends with. We can change the case. We can split it. There's a lot of stuff here. So again, I believe this video is going to go and demonstrate that. Um, but I just want to sort of set you up for the oncoming video. And again, this Python for Everybody is a great reference. And again, I'm using Colab in this demo video, which is a great thing to use. So, but again, it also works in Jupyter Notebook. So hopefully this is helpful.
So, so again, starting here, you can see we have this mbox.txt file, right? And we talked about this before for something in the file. So again, I'm going to call this variable line. And if it starts with from, it's going to print the line. I didn't print everything out. I skipped over that step here, as in the previous one. Just for line in MB file print line, we get everything. At least for now, we're going to do where we initially start, where we parse the file, and we get everything with the from in it. So I run that, I do get this right here. So again, it's good to maybe take this stepwise as you approach parsing and just verify the results. But in any case, here I have a list of email addresses with the from. So I think I've caught that. So we'll go ahead and go to now. We'll split out the emails. Now let's talk about splitting. Let's look at this previous list here. So because the line is a string, we can do some string parsing on it. What that entails is we can set our splitter. So we have a dot split, and we can determine our delimiter. So in our case, if we want to use maybe the colon for our delimiter, it's going to give us two fields. And just note, everything starts at 0 and 1. So if there was another field here, of course, we'd have 2, 3, and 4, and so on. So we can make this wherever we want. I think by default, it's a space, which probably would work. And this is the thing about this class and Python in general, and data parsing, data processing in general, is you might have a different approach than this. And really, as long as the end result is correct, the path you take with your code is really up to you, what you feel works the best. So I'm not going to get into the Pythonic part of it, what is the most Pythonic process. But for now, though, let's take this here. So again, here we're using the dot starts with. So again, we have a string function here, and it's grabbing in with the from. So, and we're going to basically extend that. We're going to split out the emails. So here we can see email equals. So I create a new variable, and it's going to equal line, which of course we saw before, it starts from. I do a dot split. Now again, I'm going to use the colon as the delimiter. And again, this is where you look at the help for the string parsing for dot split. And afterwards, I put in brackets here, which basically column do I want? In this case, I want column 1. So remember, always count at 0, always start at 0. If I was to put in, if I think 1, 2, if I put in 2, I'll get an out of range error because there is no 2 here. You can see it's empty. So now I print this new variable called email, and I got the emails. So again, very handy here. So we're putting some conditions. First, we're doing a loop, and we put a condition in front of it, if, and we do a string parsing, which it starts with, from, and then we create another variable called email, and equals line.split, and I'm splitting off this, and equals the first field after. So again, always remember, start at 0. So if I did field 0, I would get just a bunch of froms. So basically that number 1 right there. And if I do 2, it will probably give me an error. So So again, email equals this, and you can see it looks correct. So I'm pretty happy with the results there. So let's extend this even further. Actually, just run that. We'll keep that because we'll come back to it. Let's parse out the email source. Now again, when it comes to the very end of this, you might say, well, we could have done things a little more efficiently. And you definitely can. I think it's very stepwise. So you can see here, I ran this code. So I added another variable. So email equals, again, we have this from the previous one. And I say source. Source equals email.split. And I'm going to split at the @ sign here. And again, I'm using field 1. So if we look at our previous list here, so again, we create a parse here, and this is our delimiter, and this will be field 0, and this will be field number 1. So I mean, getting even further down, I'm actually doing a little more in-depth splitting here. And of course, you can see the output's perfect. I got now. I have just the email source, and I'm going to call that source again. This is a new variable called source. I print source. It looks good. So now let's add some lists. So again, lists I'll probably maybe do a separate video on, but I want to make this sort of an over. Again, I want to bring in the concepts of string parsing, looping, and lists. So with lists, actually, I'm going to clear out the output here. I don't show that yet. So with lists, I'm going to create 2 empty lists. One called Umish and Burke, and this denotes empty lists, the brackets. So I got the same code from above, but of course I dumped the print source, and I added this block here. So I added some if statements. So if source starts with Berkeley, media.berkeley.edu, I'm going to do a burk.append. So again, this is a list. So if I do the list name dot tab, you'll get a list of things you can interact with that list item. Append, sort, index, and again, I don't want to get too much into lists. We'll go over some more functions of lists in a separate video, but I want to show you how I created 2 empty lists, and if I get Berkeley, edu, I'm going to append the list with that email address. This is from previous, we saw this previous on, this is from our previous splitting. Or if it starts with UMich, for University of Michigan, let's say, I'm going to append to UMic, and I'm going to print both out. So again, if I run this, you can see I have, now this is a raw list print here, so you can see there's the email address, and I do get the carriage return inside there as part of that. You can do some cleanup if you like. I'm not going to go into that further. We can look at more further string cleanup, rtrim, ltrim, for example, or we just do trim. You can trim off spaces, and you can trim off the hard returns. So this becomes an issue. It's good to know it's there though in my raw list. But again, you can see I have now 2 lists. Now again, to see those lists in a little bigger format, I can just do for M and UMic, print M, and for B and Burke, print B. So pretty cool. So what we did was create a loop, which uses the lists. We open a file from external, and then we use a loop here to loop through the file, find everything that starts with. So we'll call it a filter. Parsing filter, I guess, could be the same terminology. I'm going to call it a filter. Everything that starts with from, and here I'm going to do parsing. I'm going to call this parsing, where I actually split out that line. Split it into item 1, give me the email, and then from there split it again, give me the source, and use that source as a parser here and say if it's equal to this, append it to this list. So this hopefully brings other topics. Again, other lecture videos will have some more detail, and again, don't bypass the documentation that came with the textbook. A lot of information here, really good stuff. It's going to get a lot more details, and of course, don't discount just the raw Python documentation itself from your Python help. But again, you can see here, just bringing these concepts, just bits of them. We have an effective parser, and we parsed out emails by source and created 2 separate lists. We didn't really go into writing out from files. I don't think the text talks about that. I could write out a list to a file, and that would enhance, and I would open a file for writing, and I would write out that list to it, and then I would close it, and I can have separate lists. Now, again, this is a pretty small list here. Let's scale this up. Let's think 10,000 emails with maybe a couple hundred or more, 500 or more emails per university, multiple universities. So you can see where this little demonstration could be scaled up. And yeah, so we get to a couple thousand or more. Yeah, maybe this becomes a temporary holding point, and then I'll actually write those out to a source file on disk or into a database. Again, the outputs database, JSON file, XML, SQL database, flat file database. There's all kinds of options here. So in any case, that should end our demo here. So again, this is sort of a hybrid file parsing demo, title it that. And it should hopefully give you some hints about bringing in the concepts so far as we look into parsing, which are going to be a very critical part of this course. Anyways, hope it was helpful. Thank you.